Keir Starmer has done well so far. He's navigated his visit to Washington without humiliation. That's an achievement. He's avoided direct engagement on Donald Trump's more outlandish ambition. That's an achievement. Extracted from the former president a vague but serviceable commitment to transatlantic solidarity. An achievement. He's even managed to assemble a European summit that, while lacking in dramatic breakthrough, has reaffirmed Britain's standing in the new diplomatic scramble. For this, he's been praised in Parliament. A former Conservative Foreign Secretary has noted that Starmer has not put a foot wrong, while the Lib Dem leader has gushed that Britain was leading the world, as we have so many times in the past. The mere absence of buffoonery is now taken as statesmanship. But this is the new reality. The stakes of diplomacy have risen so high that a Prime Minister's primary challenge is to emerge unscathed. The world has shifted, yet Westminster has not fully caught up. In the space of days, Trump's return to the White House has throttled Ukraine's fight for survival. Aid has been frozen, intelligence sharing suspended, and at the same time, Starmer's strategic manoeuvres reflect an outdated hope that the old order can be gently coaxed back into being. The Commons debate on Monday exposed this discordance. MPs across the spectrum remain bound to a residual hope of Trump whispering, believing they might still pull the former president back into the NATO fold. Starmer is right to fight for the Atlantic Alliance, but it's no longer a reliable foundation for planning. This has echoes of the early weeks of COVID-19, when government budgets proceeded as though the crisis was not about to consume every other agenda. This is the same fog in which Starmer's government now operates. Labour's promise to raise defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, with a vague allusion to 3% at some unspecified point, was received with applause. Yet all know this is insufficient. The timeline of up to 9 years is a fiction, when rearmament is required now. Defence is no longer a secondary concern. It's central to Britain's future security. It's central to Europe's security. And yet the Treasury plans remain tethered to outdated fiscal red lines. It's a fantasy, and it's an indulgence. Germany has already adjusted to the moment, spectacularly abandoning its debt brake to boost defence spending, and the UK, by contrast, clings to fiscal restraint. Starmer's government remains reluctant to entertain new borrowing, while tax rises remain off the table. Yet the necessity of rearming Britain will demand difficult choices that have not yet been confronted, and if Labour refuses to shift its tax policy, it will have to make cuts elsewhere. What will give? Will net zero targets be quietly pushed back? Will energy independence plans be sacrificed? Certainly Ed Miliband looks as if he's being pressured at the moment. Which infrastructure projects will be shelved? Which new towns Rayner's flagship vision will be quietly dropped? Or will public services simply take the strain? These are questions Labour needs to answer. For now, Starmer's team remains in a state of both knowing and not knowing, a Schrodinger's cat situation. But events will not wait. Ukraine's fate hangs in the balance, as does the credibility of Western security. Trump's freeze on military aid has already had devastating consequences. In a sign of desperate pragmatism, Zelensky has suggested that Russia could release prisoners of war as a gesture of goodwill, testing the Kremlin's supposed commitment to peace. If the Kremlin actually had a commitment to peace, it wouldn't be bombing civilian sites across Ukraine last night. If Trump is sincere in his repeated assertion that Putin wants peace, then the simplest demonstration would be for Moscow to halt its attacks on Ukrainian civilians. Instead, as diplomatic overtures continue, the missile strikes persist. I think 2 people last night were killed, 28 people injured. The EU, at least, is attempting to rise to the moment. Ursula von der Leyen's proposed €800 billion rearmament plan signals a dramatic shift. European leaders are acknowledging that the continent's security cannot be outsourced. Yet internal divisions remain. Hungary and Slovakia, ever the Kremlin's closest allies within the EU, threaten to dilute the effectiveness of this resolve. There is a solution. The solution is for the EU to expand, to embrace Turkey, and to take in Britain in some form. Zelensky, meanwhile, is playing a dangerous but necessary game, keeping diplomatic channels open with Washington while pressing for European unity. His meeting with Trump was particularly fraught. Accusations of ingratitude flew. The Ukrainian leader is now engaged with the Gulf states hoping to secure alternative lines of support. They may present themselves. For Britain, the question remains, does it grasp the scale of this global shift, or will it remain tethered to past assumptions, hoping the transatlantic alliance can be patched up with soft reassurances? What we need now is a greater EU. We need the EU to ditch its absurdity about these four principles. We need an EU solidarity, a defence solidarity that stretches from Britain, from Ireland through Britain to Turkey and the Baltic states. Without that, the EU is insecure. And with that, the EU faces some chance of survival against an evil and unpredictable Russia that cannot be trusted. In reality, the choices are stark. If security is the priority, the Treasury needs to adjust, Britain needs to adjust, the EU needs to adjust. The era of restrained defence spending is over. The era of negotiating about European integration is over. The public needs to be prepared for trade-offs. Starmer has shown diplomatic agility, but soon he must go beyond the avoidance of missteps and articulate a new strategy fit for the world as it now stands. And that is one of European unity, one of unity for the continent of Europe that stretches from Ireland to Istanbul.